Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We have a lot to talk about. At first, we're going to focus a little bit of time and attention on what is happening in Congress. We'll have a chance to talk with a member of Congress, Van Taylor, who's been on the program with us many times before. Then we're going to turn our attention in the next half hour to what is happening in the Texas Capitol. And Jonathan Saenz will be with us. Along the way, we'll have all sorts of other very interesting interviews, ranging from a conversation about critical thinking and literature all the way to a little bit later in the third hour, John Humphrey will be in studio with us as we talk about I Am Second. So lots to cover. We'll also, of course, keep you updated as we move along on this whole question about whether or not to fund the wall and a number of other issues. But let's first of all bring back to the microphone individual that has been with us many times before, a seventh-generation Texan, individual that also served in the military, which, by the way, is going to be really important in just a minute, because we're going to be talking about some of the legislation that he has introduced, and, of course, was sworn in as a member of Congress representing the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Texas. Van Taylor, welcome back to Point of View.
Hey, great being on with you, Kerby.
Love to hear from you for just a minute. As a freshman member of Congress, you've been through quite a number of things. I have, for example, something that you said after the State of the Union address, but of course, this is different than serving in the Texas legislature or the Texas Senate. Sure. And I'd love to know some of the experiences you've had just even the last week or so, because you've had the State of the Union address, you've had all these debates and budget issues about the wall. But what has it been like for you actually arriving in Washington, D.C. and beginning to get started?
Well, I'll say one of the high points is just, the caliber of a lot of my colleagues. I mean, there are a lot of really competent patriots here on both sides of the aisle, and they're operating in a very, very broken system that in a lot of ways they have a hard time. It's hard to see the system you're in. You just show up and that's the way it is. And if you haven't seen another system, it's hard to know that what you're in doesn't really work. And I'll key in on one basic idea. Most states, counties, cities, countries have a single bill budget. In Congress, they have a 13-bill budget system. They have not successly passed all 13 of those bills on time in 16 years. Yes. I mean, they're 0 for 16. And, you kind of point that out to people, and they say, well, we've always done it that way. And it's actually not true. They only started doing that in 1976 was the first time they tried to do it. But pretty much the whole time they've had it, they've only succeeded in getting that done 4 times since 1976. So basically, it's a failed system. And it's not. I don't think it's the people or the partisanship. It's a very, very hard thing to pull off, passing 13 different bills with a bunch of different pieces in all of it. So,
and what you end up with are these continuing resolutions, and
right.
Let's go all the way back, since I'm the old guy around the table, to the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan finally got frustrated with that and took this stack of stuff and said, "If you send me another one of these again, I will veto it." And this is not what we find anywhere else. You have a requirement in virtually every state in the union to balance a budget. You don't have anything like that in Congress. You have a budgetary process, which in Congress is called regular order, but we just don't seem to have regular order taking place very regularly, do we?
No, and so regular order is the idea that things go through committee and that there are amendments on the floor. We have, I think there might have been one bill so far that has actually gone through committee. We have to suspend the rules, we suspend the rules literally for everything we've done so far. There are no amendments. There's virtually no regular order in Congress, and this is just contrasted to Texas, where you have a unanimous vote for the Speaker of the House, who's a Republican. You have a unanimous vote for the rules. My first day, you had a contentious partisan vote for Speaker, a contentious partisan vote on the rules. The rules were replete with ways to make it easier to raise taxes, and then they ignore the rules when you get on the floor because they suspend the rules. Literally, the first vote of the week is suspending the rules for the rest of the week, so let all the bills through.
Wow.
So.
Again, I think you made a really good point. Just one more comment, and then I want to get into some of the legislation after our break. Sure. But again, if you go to the website, and it's vantaylor.house.gov, or you don't have to remember all that, just simply click on his picture there. You'll have a lot of information from him, and some of this from the newsroom. But again, after the State of the Union address, you said there is no doubt our nation faces many challenges, and that we often disagree on the best path forward. However, the State of the Union gives us the unique opportunity to not only outline our goals for the coming year, but to identify those issues in which we may build consensus. And he said, again, the president reminded you of the bipartisan accomplishments. And I've watched the State of the Union addresses for a long time. You had a chance to actually attend it and see it. I think this was one that was very well done. And I don't know of anybody other than maybe a Ronald Reagan, who I mentioned just a minute ago, who did a better job of calling attention to some of the people in the gallery that were invited guests.
Sure. No, it was, and let me just say that it's a tremendous privilege and very humbling to serve as a member of Congress from the 3rd District of Texas. And in that capacity, the exposure and the opportunities to do some of the things that I've gotten to do have been pretty amazing. And attending the State of the Union is certainly one of them. And the president gave what I thought was a very unifying speech. A lot of things that we could all agree on. And I think polls kind of had it in the 70 to 76% approval rating for the president's message. And certainly I was very gratified by that. I will say the most shocking part to me was when the president said, "We will never be a socialist nation," and most of the Democrat House members would not stand up to applaud that line or even applaud it, which was really shocking to me. I mean, that socialism has really become such a strong pillar in their party.
And again, you probably noticed a few of the women that were dressed in white, and when he would say things about lowest unemployment for women or some of the things that have happened to women, again, sitting on their hands, about the only time it seemed that they stood when women were mentioned is the fact that we have more women serving in Congress than ever before. So it was okay to applaud yourself, but nothing else. And this is why when we come back from the break, I want to talk about some of the attempts that you have made in the past in the Texas legislature and are making now in Congress to put together some bipartisan action. And because of your military background, I know that you have organized a Veterans Patient Appreciation. I know that you are one of the individuals that introduced a bipartisan piece of legislation to prevent troop reduction in Syria. I'd love to get your comments on that. And then also one having to do with Full Military Honors Act. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time on the military. But there's a very good reason for that. First of all, that is one of the things that Van Taylor, who, of course, was with the Marine Corps, actually is of concern to. And I think you will also, as you go to his website, vantaylor.house.gov, find some of that material as well. So we'll come back and get into that conversation in a little bit more detail. And if you'd like to ask a question of Congressman Van Taylor, you can do so, 1-800-351-1212. Or in case we also broadcast not only on pointofview.net, but on Facebook Live. You want to leave a note there, we'll ask those questions as well. And then we're going to be moving on because later on this hour we have Jonathan Saenz with us, president of Texas Values. We'll move from focusing on Congress to what's happening in Austin. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Last year was a significant year in the field of biblical archaeology. One article in Christianity Today detailed biblical archaeology's top 10 discoveries. Some were recent finds, others were finds that new technology has helped read inscriptions not previously visible. Here are a few examples. When ISIS terrorists captured Mosul, they blew up the tomb of the prophet Jonah. This uncovered the remains of a palace of the Assyrian king Esarhaddon. As one article put it, ISIS accidentally corroborates the Bible, and inscriptions found in the old city of Nineveh give an order of the Assyrian kings that matches the biblical order. An inscribed piece of limestone discovered in a tomb along the west bank of the Nile was revealed to be a Semitic abecedary. It dates back to the time of Moses and fits with a statement that Moses wrote down everything the Lord had said, and it turns out he wasn't the only one writing in a Semitic script in Egypt at the time. A seal impression found in the ancient Jerusalem wall mentions the governor of the city. Governors of the city of Jerusalem are mentioned in the Old Testament, and one seal impression found apparently says Isaiah the prophet. It is with other seals with King Hezekiah of Judah. And a ring with the name Pontius Pilate on it was excavated decades ago, but only could be read recently due to advanced photographic techniques. The ring is not fancy enough to have been worn by Pilate. It probably was worn by someone authorized to act on his authority and would use it to seal official communications. This is really an exciting time in biblical archaeology. These and other finds further establish the historical reliability of the Bible. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, in theaters February 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Member of Congress Van Taylor representing the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Texas. And Congresswoman, Van, let me, if I can, for just a minute, talk about this, because one of the issues that we really want to get into is the whole issue of foreign policy. Now, Van, I understand that obviously that tends to be more of a U.S. Senate issue, but nevertheless, you and some other individuals have introduced a piece of bipartisan legislation to prevent troop reduction in Syria. Give us some perspective on that, because we've talked around this roundtable before of what that might be like and whether or not that would be heading down the same mistake and heading down the same road that when the previous president decided to pull troops out of Iraq. So explain a little bit more about that legislation and how people can support you.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. So as you're aware, I served as a Marine in Iraq and led a platoon there. And, something that I think we saw in the last decade when President Obama prematurely pulled out of Iraq and left basically open battle space that ISIS was able to metastasize into and create a caliphate and sort of create a quasi-state that lasted for several years. The United States had to basically go back into Iraq, train, advise, equip the Iraqi army to get to the point that it could finally eject the ISIS from Iraq, and that took a period of time. The other thing the United States did, was we started training Syrian forces that were willing to fight ISIS and to fight the Assad regime. And so the Assad regime is supported by Russia and Iran, and ISIS is obviously an international terrorist organization, right? So you've got 50,000 allies that the Americans are supporting in Syria time now. And you're supporting that with about several thousand, 2,500 approximately, U.S. forces. And so it's really important that the United States not prematurely withdraw. I think if unfortunately, one of the big takeaways from President Obama's foreign policy is premature withdrawal as a real cost to it, and forces you to go back and clean up the mess that you just created by trying to pull out too early. And so I and other members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, came together, introduced a piece of legislation basically calling on the president not to withdraw prematurely from Syria. And I think it's important that we all understand that you've got 2,500 Americans in Syria supporting 50,000 Syrians, and they're doing the brunt of the fighting. They're fighting and dying. And so, and then the same thing in Iraq. You've got about 5,000 Americans supporting about 300,000 Iraqi forces, and then a similar profile in Afghanistan, where you've got several thousand Americans and hundreds of thousands of Afghan troops. So, and that's, in my mind, the right way to do it. If you're going to win the war on terror, you're going to need allies. You want local allies. You want people that live there, that have a long-term vision for the future, because it's their home. It's where they live. It's not just something they're going to go occupy for a little bit and leave. It's something that they care about the future because it's where they live. And that helps you build the future, which is so important in getting a lasting peace, is building up the local organizations to do that.
And again, when you talk about wanting to come back, in some cases, that's exactly what is happening, because we in the past have raised funds to help those that were in some of these refugee camps. And, you know, there would be a natural tendency for someone to say, well, that's what happened to my homeland. I might as well see if I can somehow get an opportunity to come to the United States or to Europe or something like that. But the goal of many of those people was, you know, yes, the ISIS troops took over Mosul, but we want to return back there. This is our homeland. This is where really Christianity flourished even after the time of Christ, and has flourished ever since. And so we're talking about individuals that had a commitment to that land and a desire to make sure that it doesn't begin to be another open theater for terrorist groups to use for training, and for them that then deploy various terrorists around the world. So we're a war-weary country sometimes, Van Taylor, but at the same time, we have to recognize that there are consequences if we reduce the number of troops in Syria. And in just a minute, I want to also talk about what is happening there in South Korea. But one more point that I think you might want to make is just the fact that we not only have concerns about what is happening there with Syria, but also we have foreign actors like Iran and Russia. And that's why we need to pay attention to that as well, don't we?
Absolutely. No, clearly Russia is trying to expand their reach and their hold around the world, and they're doing that in part by supporting the Assad regime, which is a very brutal, repressive regime in Syria. And then Iran is trying to project power and become a hegemonic power. They want to have more territory, more control, more power, and so they're projecting military force into Iraq. I mean, I know that in my time in Iraq, there were certainly Iranian troops running around causing trouble, and then Iran is also supporting Syria. They're supporting forces in southern Lebanon and then in the West Bank, and so as well as they're supporting the rebels in Yemen, and so you've got a series of problems around the region that unquestionably the Iranians are causing, and so it's really important that you stand up to the Iranians and to the Russians and to ISIS. And clearly, our forces and our allies in Syria, who are fighting and dying and risking their lives, and many of them are losing their lives fighting these forces. We need to continue to support those allies. If you're going to win the war on terror, you're going to do it with allies. And it makes all the sense in the world to support them.
And again, this is the Responsible Withdrawal from Syria Act. Let me talk about one other one I know that is also another good example of that, the United States and Republic of Korea Alliance Support Act. In that particular case, again, you don't want the troops in South Korea to drop below a certain level. And as much as it is desirable on the part of this president, and even more desirable on the part of some of the Democratic presidential candidates to reduce troop levels, I just don't think it's a real wise idea to pull troops out and then invite some kind of aggression. And so what about this issue of South Korea?
Yeah, so that, again, is a bipartisan effort with myself and several other members of Congress to renew our commitment and to state specifically that we think we should continue to stay in Korea and have a long-term vision there. The United States was brought in there when a civil war broke out, and then ultimately had to liberate the southern half of Korea, allow it to have a democracy. And I think that perhaps there's no better place on the planet to see the power of the capitalist system and of the self-determined government than look at the difference in GDP per capita between South Korea and North Korea. And you've got to basically and that's a few $100s a year in North Korea and tens of thousands of dollars a year in South Korea. And you've got a dictator there in North Korea that is keeps blustering and making efforts towards nuclear weapons. Now, he hasn't had a launch in quite a while, and I think that in part that's because of President Trump's diplomacy. But at the same time, you want to continue to make sure that our ally, South Korea, knows that we're going to continue to support them. And it's unnerving to the South Koreans to know that their biggest city, Seoul, is in range of the North Korean artillery, and the North Koreans have a ton of it.
Yes. Very good. We're coming to a break, and I know I need to let you go, but I just thought I would mention that, again, we have a link to Van Taylor, and it's vantaylor.house.gov. Of course, you don't even have to remember all that because we have a link to the website. And again, we mentioned just a few of the other things you've been working on in terms of some of the military issues. So if you would like to know more about any of those, you can go to the website. I might also mention that if you are in the 3rd District and he can help you, one of the things that opens up immediately is how can I help you? And again, that's available for students, seniors, small businesses, families, veterans, and educators. So if nothing else, Representative Van Taylor, it's always great to have you on the program, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
Thanks, Kerby. Always great to be with you.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll move our focus from Congress, which is certainly very significant, and I haven't really even talked about the funding of the wall, which I'm going to save to the next hour because we'll have our national audience with us as well. But while we are here, I thought we would also spend some time talking about what is happening in Austin, and we've been hearing more and more about the so-called Ban the Bible bills. Matter of fact, a lot of people making fun of the hashtag. So I thought it's probably good to get Jonathan Saenz back to, first of all, talk about some of that legislation. Also, of course, recently we talked about the ordinance being considered in an area in the Dallas area. So I thought we would just chat with him for a few minutes as well, giving you first an update on what's happening in Congress, now an update what's happening in the Texas legislature, and maybe we'll get into the whole question of property tax reform as well. Got a lot to cover. We will do that right after this.
The leader looked around the table, motioning to the older men. He said, "You're here to remind us how faithful God has been in the past. Now, you middle-aged guys, you keep us focused on what God is doing right now. Make sure we don't stop. And you younger guys, keep us looking forward. Imagine what God wants us to be doing in the years to come." There's a lot of wisdom there. We have to be thankful for the past, focused on the present, and mindful to plan for a great future. Many listeners have made bold moves to partner with Point of View Radio and accomplish great things for more than 45 years. But as we look around, we do see many positive things, and I think we can all admit there's a lot more to be done. It's time to think about your next bold move, what you can do to invest for our nation's future. Be thinking about that. If you have an answer now, don't wait. Make your next bold move now. Give online at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. It's our future. The time is now. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Changing our focus now, we were talking, of course, with Member of Congress Van Taylor about what is happening in Washington, D.C. Let's now get our focus back on what is happening in Austin, but also we're going to talk a little bit about the Carrollton City Council as well. Jonathan Saenz, of course, is the president of Texas Values, been on the program with us many times before. We've talked about the hashtag Ban the Bible Bills. I see now the Dallas Morning News and a variety of others are making fun of that idea, so we'll see if we can get some perspective on that. But, Jonathan, as always, thank you for joining us here on Point of View.
Well, Kerby, it's great to be with you.
What about that, while I'm thinking about this, because even in my Sunday school class, I'm being introduced in a Sunday school class, and somebody holds up the Dallas Morning News and said, I was reading this story about Ban the Bible Bills, and, well, what do you think about that? So they wanted me to say something about it. Of course, I said you were going to be on, and I gave some quick answers, but I said, you got to recognize as you read through the article, it's kind of going, that's not an issue. I don't know why they're calling it that. Can you answer that? Because that's certainly something our listeners are running into now that they're becoming familiar with that hashtag and that phraseology.
Well, look, it's good to talk about these issues. And, once I'm off the air, people can go to txvalues.org, our website, and see a lot of detail on this. But I think what we see happening is we've hit the nail on the head. I mean, this rings so clear to people when they see it, and it concerns them, and rightly so. And it's unfortunate there are people that want to ban biblical beliefs. They essentially want to take the Bible out of someone's hand if a Christian counselor wants to have a counseling session with someone regarding sexuality issues, and particularly if they're a Christian and they don't want to live their life that way. There's one of the particular bills that we're concerned about, House Bill 517, that would do that. It would punish Christian counselors if they counsel people from a biblical perspective and they don't affirm and support that, beliefs regarding same-sex and transitioning from one gender to the next. And so that is what's happening. And so that's why I think and look, we were fortunate that the Dallas Morning News interviewed us about the issue, and we explained to them why that's the phrase we're using with these bills, because that's what they do. I mean, when the belief that's being attacked in this legislation is that people believe marriage is between a man and a woman, that's a biblical, Bible-based belief. If you're not allowed to have that belief, if you're punishing someone for having that belief, you're banning their belief in the Bible. You're banning the Bible. I mean, and so in one of the situations I mentioned, you could have the actual book not be allowed to be used in a counseling session because of what it says regarding biblical beliefs on marriage and sexuality. And so, but I think there's a lot of attention on it because people, are very concerned that you see legislative efforts going this far. And some of their first thought is, well, really? Are they really trying to go that far? And then when they read through it and recognize, and this is based on legal analysis and experience for decades, myself and my team, and they go, wow, it actually could do that.
And again, let me just mention that as we have a link to txvalues.org, there's information about that. Last time I counted, I think there were at least 7 bills in the Texas House that relate to that, at least 3 in the Senate. And again, keeping track of those, like trying to keep track of grandchildren sometimes because, more pop up all the time. But it is an illustration, I think, of the fact that this isn't just a small issue. This isn't just one bill. There's a series of bills. And, Jonathan, you and I have been in the battle long enough to know that in the past, people really tried to sneak things through. But I think because of the feeling that, well, Beto O'Rourke did a lot better, and maybe it's time now to just come out with our full agenda and not hide behind some of these issues. That's why when people say, oh, it can't possibly be like that, well, it is, because I think there is a sense of the LGBT caucus is now going to be successful in passing this legislation and will turn Texas into what we find in, say, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the state of California.
No, there are legitimate concerns that some of the political dynamics, whether or not they're actually happening that way or not, that's the perception and belief of some. So you got to be mindful of that. I mean, you can't leave anything to chance. That's why we're at the Capitol every day. Our office is 2 blocks from the Texas Capitol. I'm in the Capitol right now. And that's important. And one way people can help us is by coming to our Faith and Family Day. That's on March 13th. And People can sign up at txvalues.org if they want to register. We're going to have a Chick-fil-A lunch. It's only $5. I mean, you can hardly go through the drive-through for Chick-fil-A itself and get lunch for $5. But this includes half a day of training, a rally with elected officials. Senator Kelly Hancock is going to be one of our speakers. Representative Matt Schaefer and 40 Days for Life founder David B. Wright is going to be a part of our rally. But it is important for people to get engaged. And to some extent, that is what's going on. People think some of the dynamics in Texas have changed, so they want to strike while they think the iron is hot. And we're not going to sit by and just think that, oh, well, these things are less likely to pass and wait until it's too late to sound the alarm. And we're getting a good response. I mean, close to 40,000 emails have been sent to Texas House and Senate members. And that's why I think you saw the article in the Dallas Morning News and others, because
got their attention.
The media is noticing it too. I think they tried to some of them might have dismissed it at first, but now they realize, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so, a lot of the folks on the other side are starting to respond. But what this shows you is they're trying to exploit, I think, a lack of religious liberty protection specific in our state law. So when it comes to issues of Christian ministries making decisions about how they do things and run their ministries based on biblical beliefs, Christian counselors, Christian cake bakers, we don't have anything in law specifically that says that they can't be punished by the government for these views. And years ago, it may not have been necessary. But I think we've reached the point to where it is.
Well, and again, let me just come back, as you mentioned, the Texas Faith and Family Day. You can go to texasfaithandfamily.com or simply go, of course, txvalues.org. And the featured speaker you mentioned in passing, but he's been on the program with us before, David B. Wright, 40 Days for Life. And this is an opportunity to hear somebody who's been just a great prayer warrior and really made a difference in the very significant battle for life. So there are all sorts of good reasons for you to register March 13th. It's taking place in Austin, Texas. If you say, I really don't know much about the legislature, that's why you need to go, because you'll get some training, you'll get to meet your legislators, you'll get to hear some great people, and it will be very good for you and your family. Let's see if we can follow up on something. Last time we had you on, we were talking about a Carrollton City Council. In this case, it would be sort of what you might call a ban the Bible ordinance, a little different than the ban the Bible bills in the Texas legislature. But what took place?
Yeah, well, look, this was last Tuesday, and a lot of times the way these things happen, notice comes out, at least we find out about it just a day or two before. We found out about it last Monday, and we went right to work. And anytime you have the words sexual orientation and gender identity placed into government regulations and laws, it's an expansion of government. It's a redefinition of sex and regarding government laws. And that's what they try to do in the city of Carrollton. That's what they're trying to do with these ban the Bible bills here at the state legislature. And the one at Carrollton applied to people, not just people that work in the city, but anyone that contracts with the city. A lot of times you have Christian ministries that'll form a partnership with the government to provide services like feeding the homeless and mobile loaves and fishes and things of that nature, where they'll partner along with government entities. And this is what they're doing in the city of Carrollton. They're trying to target those contractors and say that they've got to have certain beliefs regarding these issues of sexuality and gender identity, when we know that there's a lot of disagreement and a lot of views on these issues. And so why is the government going to try to punish one group over the other? But that's what these policies do. But here's what was concerning. The city of Carrollton had a discussion about this issue. We didn't find out till the day before. And so they bring this issue up for a vote, the sexual orientation gender identity ordinance. But they had discussion and vote of this, and then they allowed the public to testify. We had members of our team, and there were members of the local community. They sat there and waited for hours and listened to all the discussion and debate, and then the vote. And then they said, oh, by the way, now we want to hear what you have to say about it now that we already passed it and it's already in law. I mean, I don't know that I have ever seen such a level of disrespect for local residents on display in a government entity like we did last week in Carrollton.
Well, again, I think we're going to have to pay attention to that. I mean, there are elections and there are remedies for that, and to pay attention to how some of that was railroaded through. I want to come back after the break and talk a little bit more about what are some action items for individuals. Of course, also on your website, you have some pro-family legislative priorities. Of course, a big battle right now taking place over the issue of property tax reform, and I think that illustrates another reason why to be involved in the Texas Faith and Family Day, because I'll just get out of the issue of pro-life issues and pro-family issues for a minute. Just when you're looking at property tax, you had all sorts of individuals that we pay for with our tax dollars, government officials and other individuals going and lobbying for really no change. And then the private citizens who had to spend their own money and travel on their own dime and pay for their own gas to go down to Austin, found that sometimes the game is a little bit rigged in that regard. So we'll talk about, again, some of the aspects of that, but we need to take a break. And again, if you'd like to know a little bit more about some of the topics we're addressing, just go to txvalues.org. You'll find out more about Jonathan Saenz and about that very significant event taking place in March. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Veterans memorials are symbols meant to remind the living of the service and sacrifice the fallen made for freedom. That is why Gold Star Mothers in 1919 started work on the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial. They did not want the world to forget the sacrifice their sons made, so they, along with the American Legion, erected a cross-shaped memorial. The design mirrored the universally accepted symbol erected over the thousands of graves of men who died in Europe defending freedom. No one complained for almost 100 years. Recently, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit refused to overturn an opinion of a panel of that court that would direct a federal district court to consider whether the monument should have its horizontal arms removed or be razed to the ground completely. Such a decision sets a dangerous precedent for veterans memorials across America. If this decision stands, other memorials will be targeted for destruction as well. First Liberty Institute will appeal this case to the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of its clients, the American Legion. I encourage you to go to don'ttearmedown.com and join us in defending this memorial to the 49 men of Prince George's County, Maryland, killed in the line of duty during World War I. We forget what we do not see. Unless the Supreme Court intervenes, the Bladensburg Memorial and similar memorials in close by Arlington National Cemetery may disappear as well. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Jonathan Saenz with us for a few more minutes. And Jonathan, just a minute ago, I was using the illustration of property tax reform. By the way, if you want to address that, that would be fine. But it did seem to me that I was watching in Austin something that maybe illustrates the point. And that is various groups sometimes even receive tax dollars and then go and spend their time in Austin lobbying either in front of the State Board of Education, in front of the legislature, in various legislative committees. And those of us that are just sort of grassroots, pro-life, pro-family individuals, conservative individuals, have to go and spend our own money, our own time to go and actually counter sometimes some of that lobbying. And so I know that's one of the many reasons why you've wanted to put together and have put together this Texas Faith and Family Day on March 13th, because we just need to get more people to show up, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we're making it family friendly. It's only $5, but it's not if you're just paying as far as admission to come to the event. That includes Chick-fil-A lunch. And look, I mean, here's the secret. We're contributing a little bit to this event because it's going to cost us a little bit more than probably just $5 a person.
Sure,
to be
I
honest.
understand that.
But look, we want people to be a part of the event and have a nice lunch and enjoy time with their members. But it is very important, and so we want the cost to be minimal. But yes, you're right. I mean, a lot of people are using taxpayer dollars to come down here and lobby. They're using your tax dollars to then lobby for more taxes, to increase your taxes. Now, one thing I will say about the legislative process here that's different from places like the city of Carrollton, they actually allow you to testify
what a
and hear
concept.
your voice before they vote on a measure. And I will, look, it's not something to take lightly either because, and I'm not suggesting you are, I'm just saying it's a very important, it's an American principle. I mean, it should be something that's accepted worldwide in any government entity, but in a lot of places, you're not allowed that. That's what makes us exceptional as a country, and it is very concerning, and to say the least, when you have these local governments who do not allow a fair process like they did in Carrollton. I mean, what a sham to treat local people that way with disrespect. But then they come down to the legislature and they want to use a system that is fair and allows them to have their voice heard. But then they use your tax dollars to almost dominate the appearance at the hearings because a lot of people can't pay to come down here because they're not being paid with tax dollars to come down here. They have to use their own dime. And so a lot of times it can misrepresent what's really happening and where the support or the opposition is in numbers.
Well, again, we have, as you well know, a pretty significant activist audience, and certainly over the years have demonstrated that when we've had calls to Congress. This particular hour is a little different because we have an opportunity to talk to mostly people in the state of Texas, although I do know we have listeners in Minnesota and a number of other places. But by and large, I really wanted to focus a lot on Texas sometimes just so that we could mobilize some people. So what can they do? Because whether we look at these bills in the legislature right now, or for our listeners maybe that are in the Carrollton area or nearby, do you have some action items for any of our listeners?
Well, absolutely. It's always a good idea to contact your elected official directly by phone, by email, or in person. A lot of people don't realize, even though a lot of actions happen here at the Texas Capitol, a lot of House and Senate members have district offices. So you look at, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a lot of those House and Senate members have offices close by if you can't make it to the Capitol. I mean, the best option always is to come to the Capitol and knock on their door and go into their office directly and talk with them directly or the staff. But if you can't do that, you can go to our Action Center at txvaluesaction.org. You can use our action system to get contacted directly. And here's how it works. When you go through our system, we dial the phone number for the elected official through our system, and then you are patched in. So you don't even have to know the number. You just say that you want to go through our system. Our system electronically sets it up. They dial the phone number for you. They pull you into the call. Next thing you know, you're talking to your House or Senate member's office directly. So we try to make it real simple so you can make that direct contact if you can't come down to the Capitol directly. But apparently some people are not getting the message because other banned Bible bills have been filed since our first round of action on this. Mm-hmm. But not only that, if people will say, look, they need religious freedom protection in state law, and the Carrollton thing is a fine example of this. It's because a lot of people at the local level, local government officials, are out of control. You do not have local control when you shut the citizens out of the process like they did at Carrollton. They don't want local control. They want to monopolize their power locally, and they don't want to be accountable to anybody, their constituents, or the state. And that's not how we do things in Texas.
I grew up in California, but I can't even think of a time there in the California Assembly or the California Senate or any of the city councils that I was familiar with where they would vote and then say, oh, then we'll get public comment. I mean, this is something that is so unusual that it's a head shaker, and we're going to continue to follow up on that. But let me mention one other action item. Obviously, you can contact your members there in Austin, but also let me just encourage you to go to txvalues.org because, for example, there's some material there about Jack Phillips in the crosshairs. what has happened since, for example, Target has changed their bathroom policy and all sorts of other articles. You can take one of those, cut and paste them, or even hit the share button, put it on your Facebook page, your Twitter page, or something like that, and you will find that you are maybe educating people in your sphere of influence. There are people right now, you, for example, listening to Jonathan Saenz, but there are a lot of people you know in your sphere of influence that don't know anything about this. So take the time to kind of pass that on so that we can mobilize individuals. And we did our best last week to try to mobilize people for the Carrollton City Council, but then when everybody sat for hours, then the vote was taken. Then they said, yeah, okay, those of you that have been sitting here for hours, now we'll let you talk, but it's not going to make any difference because we've already passed the ordinance. Jonathan, something needs to happen, and we'll probably take some action in that regard in the future. But one last time, you really want to see as many people as possible show up on March 13th. And again, David B. Wright and a number of other outstanding individuals, almost all of the people you mentioned that are going to be speaking have been on this program. And it can't be any cheaper than $5. So I would encourage people to make their way to Austin and enjoy the time and really get a chance to be involved on the grassroots that day there in Austin. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
You bet. And people can use the hashtag on social media. They can put oppose and then hashtag ban the Bible. That's where we're getting a lot of traction.
Okay, well, there's another opportunity, so use that social media.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Oppose, hashtag ban the Bible, bills. Excuse me.
Gotcha. And again, we have some of that information on the website. So, Jonathan, thank you, and we'll do it again. We need to take a break, and when we come back, get a little bit of an update real quickly on where the vote is. I think the president will sign this, but maybe not, and we'll find out on the funding of the wall. If he does sign it, that will still extend the wall, I think 55 miles, I think was the estimate some people were making. But then we got Gerit Quealy on talking just for a few minutes about her book dealing with Shakespeare. And we're not going to necessarily talk about Shakespeare and all that as much as we're going to talk about the idea of critical thinking and the importance of classical Christian education, the importance of good education. Then I do want to take on one of the hot issues that has really broken over the last couple of days, 700 victims potentially of Southern Baptist sexual abuse. That may be an overstatement, but even if you look at the 220 that are documented, what about this? And so we'll get into those issues. And as I mentioned, in the third hour, we'll have John Humphrey with us talking about I Am Second. And if you've not seen those I Am Second videos, we'll educate you about that as well. But let's encourage you to go to the website, and that is pointofview.net. You can find out more about Van Taylor and Jonathan Saenz, both who have been with us here the first hour. You also will find that my commentary today is on biblical archaeology, and the reason for that is this last year has been a, if you will, banner year for archaeology, confirming the Bible. Matter of fact, Christianity Today had an article called Biblical Archaeology's Top 10 Discoveries, so we get into some of that as well. And speaking of that, if you'd ever like to see some of those archaeological finds, you might want to join with us on our trip to Israel. That's taking place in October. Let's take a break. We've got a lot more to cover, and we will do so right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We're going to spend some time in just a minute talking about critical thinking and the evaluation of, the classics. And of course, we talk quite often on this program about the importance of things like classical education and the rest. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But let me just mention that later this hour, we're going to get into a couple stories. One, of course, will the president sign the $1.4 billion allocation for what would essentially build another 55 miles of fencing in primarily the Rio Grande Valley, or will he not? So we'll get into some of those issues, because that's certainly something that is in the news. And we wanted to today maybe address this issue of the victims of sexual abuse in some of these Southern Baptist churches. So that will be taking place later this hour. But I thought it would be good for just a few minutes to really, if nothing else, focus on the value, of reading things like Shakespeare. And we have now on the line with us Gerit Quealy, who is the author of Botanical Shakespeare. And if you are not familiar with that, we have a link to that on our website. Of course, you may also remember her as starring in the daytime drama Ryan's Hope. And when we talk about this issue, I think it is important to recognize that you go back maybe a century ago and you were to go into a home, there are two books you always could assume were in that home. One would be a Bible, and probably another one would be maybe the works of William Shakespeare or some Shakespearean play, sonnet, something like that. And at a time when the universities are, in many cases, saying, we don't want to even read those individuals anymore, I thought it would be worth coming back and talking about this. Might just mention her new book, Botanical Shakespeare, also has been interesting enough, the foreword has been written by Helen Mirren, which I believe is the first time that's ever taken place. So again, I wanted to welcome to the microphone Gerit. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I know you've been doing a lot of tours on your book, but I thought I'd broaden it beyond the book, although we do have information there. If people would like to read some of it or buy it, that is on our website. But what about this? At a time when I think we probably have even a greater need to teach young people how to read and to think about complex thoughts and to develop critical thinking, we have so many universities, and now even it's worked its way down into the secondary schools and other places, which are saying, reading something like William Shakespeare, that's optional, or maybe even something that should never be part of the curriculum. What are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, since I wrote the book, I have very strong feelings about that. And one of the reasons for the book is, to present Shakespeare in a different way, looking at plants and flowers and things that we eat, hopefully every day if we're healthy, carrots and, leeks maybe and all that kind of stuff, and finding another path in. But yes, to be serious, I think it's really very important. What you brought up about there being a Bible and a collected works of Shakespeare in every home, I still think that should be true. I think it's foundational. I really do.
I do not know how you could consider yourself educated if at least you did not understand some of that. There are so many phrases that we use day to day that come from the Bible, so many phrases we use that come from Shakespeare. And if you really wanted to be an educated person, even if you were convinced that we are not supposed to read those dead white authors, just to understand where some of these phrases that we use all the time come from, and understand tragedy and comedy, And if you ever wanted to write a play, an arc for a character and all sorts of things, that comes from having read some of those great works, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I often say, when I'm teaching, I say to kids that it's a crib sheet for the Greek and Roman philosophers and, Plato and Plutarch and Socrates and Virgil and all that kind of stuff that you don't have to read if you read Shakespeare. But I also have to say, you mentioned the Bible, and that goes way back, but Shakespeare is at the beginning of what we call early modern society. Everything really that we do now legally and contractually and so many strata of society is based on the early modern period, which was established in Queen Elizabeth's time. So like you said, you get a huge vocabulary. People have said everything from 18 to 28,000 words. You get plot structure if you want to be a writer. But the most important thing, I think, is they had a concept at that time called learning through delight. And there became a separation, 19th century maybe, where learning and education was hard and you had to go to school and this was this, and fun was something different, something else. And we have filtered that down into, reality shows now. But actually learning is fun and it's just the same as eating good food. If you're putting good stuff in your brain, it feels good.
Well, and again, as you pointed out, even when we sometimes talk about homeschooling, delight-directed education and those kinds of ideas. But let me pick a few, because I wrote a commentary a while back in which I just picked out some of the phrases people use and see if you would agree with me. We talk about people catching a cold. Well, you can go to one of the kind of lesser-known Shakespeare plays where he says, "Straight away for Britain, lest the bargain should catch cold and starve," or we've all heard the phrase, "It's Greek to me." Well, that goes back to Julius Caesar. Caesar doesn't understand because he doesn't speak Greek. You can have the idea that love is blind. I mean, you see that phrase in The Merchant of Venice. You've got just a lot of examples. Or one more, just I won't wear everybody out with all these. Heart of gold. That's a phrase that's found in Henry V. I mean, you see at some point, you hear those phrases so often. And if you really wanted to be educated, you would want maybe to even know the history of those. At least I tend to be interested in those kinds of things, and maybe we're the exception. But it just illustrates again why we don't want to throw Shakespeare out, do we?
No, we don't. And it really, I always say it does a body good. And one of the things that I've found in doing touring with the book and all that stuff is that people who love it were given to read it or perform it when they were young, and they remember that experience because, when you swallow it, when you have it in your mouth, when you're living out these characters, it creates a shift, I think, in your body and your brain. Whereas people who are taught, trochee and spondee and what's the rhyme scheme and why did, all this kind of heady intellectual stuff too soon, develop the distaste for it,
Well, I would certainly agree. We need to take a break. When we come back, let me open up the phones in case any of you maybe are teaching right now in a classical Christian educational program, or maybe believe that we have thrown the classics out and need to come back. Those are some opportunities for you to join us before we get back into some of the news cycle. I just thought this would be helpful because from time to time we do talk about education, the need for us to be well read. I think it's important to still have a great books class in various high schools. I took one and lived to tell about it. So I think these are things that we need to talk about. And the next time you have somebody say, you shouldn't wear your heart on your sleeve, well, that comes from Othello. So we're going to take a break and point out that there are a lot of connections to Shakespeare. We say them every day. Most of them don't know where they come from. And, of course, I haven't even begun to talk about all the phrases we use, which are biblical phrases. Maybe you figured those out a long time ago. And it's just a good illustration of the fact that if you really want to be an educated person today, certainly need to read certainly the Bible, but I think also some of the great literature, which in many cases really reinforms and even undergirds biblical ideas. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Last year was a significant year in the field of biblical archaeology. One article in Christianity Today detailed biblical archaeology's top 10 discoveries. Some were recent finds, others were finds that new technology has helped read inscriptions not previously visible. Here are a few examples. When ISIS terrorists captured Mosul, they blew up the tomb of the prophet Jonah. This uncovered the remains of a palace of the Assyrian king Esarhaddon. As one article put it, ISIS accidentally corroborates the Bible, and inscriptions found in the old city of Nineveh give an order of the Assyrian kings that matches the biblical order. An inscribed piece of limestone discovered in a tomb along the west bank of the Nile was revealed to be a Semitic abecedary. It dates back to the time of Moses and fits with a statement that Moses wrote down everything the Lord had said, and it turns out he wasn't the only one writing in a Semitic script in Egypt at the time. A seal impression found in the ancient Jerusalem wall mentions the governor of the city. Governors of the city of Jerusalem are mentioned in the Old Testament, and one seal impression found apparently says Isaiah the prophet. It is with other seals with King Hezekiah of Judah. And a ring with the name Pontius Pilate on it was excavated decades ago, but only could be read recently due to advanced photographic techniques. The ring is not fancy enough to have been worn by Pilate. It probably was worn by someone authorized to act on his authority and would use it to seal official communications. This is really an exciting time in biblical archaeology. These and other finds further establish the historical reliability of the Bible. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, in theaters February 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Gerit Quealy with us for a few more minutes, and then we're going to move on to some of the issues in the news. A new book out called Botanical Shakespeare, and first of all, if you like gardening, you like Shakespeare, you like either or both, I think you're going to really appreciate that, and there's a link to that on our website. And just a minute ago, Gerit, I was talking about some of those phrases. I can't help myself. Got to at least use one more. Break the ice. Hear that all the time. That one comes from Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. So we use these phrases. We don't know where they come from. And I think an educated person would want to know that. And as you point out, we want to teach it in a way that will be of interest to them. If we teach them just, what a sonnet is or some of that, maybe that gets a little bit boring. But at the same time, the issues that Shakespeare raised up at the time in terms of the tragedies and the comedies and all those are universal, and they are another way, along with kind of biblical allusions and illustrations, to teach some very important principles. And so I think this is something that when a university or even a high school says, no, we aren't going to study any of that, they have done themselves harm and really harm the students, because if they really want to be educated for the 21st century, they need to understand some of that and have that as part of the literature that they were actually forced to read.
Absolutely. Although forced. We want to make it fun for them, too,
But they wouldn't read it on their own. That's what I'm meaning by that, yeah.
Well, but I think if they go to see a play, and that's what happened at the time, theater became this big thing. It was this new entertainment. Everything was new. And then they started printing the plays by the 1590s, the history plays especially, and people started buying them, and literacy went up. And it's the same kind of situation now. Reading them or seeing them or speaking them is only going to raise your raise your IQ, basically. I mean, they've done all kinds of studies about how it forces the brain synapses to connect in different ways and on higher wavelengths. So, you know, even if you're planting a rose in the ground and thinking about Romeo and Juliet, then you're engaging on a physical level and an emotional level and an intellectual level.
Well, again, you just talked about raising your IQ. I wrote a piece a while back in which we talked about the fact that we probably have 5 times as many words as at the time of Shakespeare. Now, we can have real debates about how many words there are, and there are debates about are all of those words in our dictionary. But if you count up all the words in the plays and sonnets of Shakespeare, I think you have about 884,000 words. And a lot of those are new words. So not only do you have phrases that we use today, it's all Greek to me, he's got a heart of gold, I want to break the ice, I don't wear your feelings on your sleeve, whatever that might be. You also have a lot of words we use today that essentially were created by William Shakespeare. True?
Well, because he was bringing in words from Italian and from Latin and from French and all that stuff. So the language, the English language, was really coalescing at that time as well. So, yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, let's see if we can take some phone calls. If you'd like to join the conversation, that number is 1-800-351-1212. We are privileged to have for just a few more minutes Gerit Quealy, and again, the latest book, which is also endorsed, forward by Helen Mirren, pretty interesting, is on the website. And let's take some phone calls. We'll go to Alaska first, KJNP. And Eric, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Well, that's great, and I just want to say I really appreciate meeting you at KJMP's 50th anniversary. That was a real blessing.
Well, I'm going to get out there to North Pole, Alaska again. We're going to make that happen so I can shake some more hands. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, I've been, in high-tech stuff for many, many years. I worked for UCLA Plasma Physics Department, and Euclid's Elements is one of those books that every engineer is supposed to have read and never got around to it. Well, I finally got around to it, and the insights it gives it even into electromagnetic theory is just absolutely amazing. You know, you wonder how he did it with what little he had to work with. You know, and the insights from Euclid are just absolutely spectacular. You know, so I just got really involved in that, and
it's funny. I was watching a YouTube video a while back because 2 of my degrees are in science, so I had a lot of math. And again, it's just amazing some of the things from the Greek philosophers, and I still think a lot of that still is relevant, and of course the mathematics and those kinds of things. So again, maybe Gerit, for just a minute, when we talk about being educated, reading something from the Greek culture, something from the Roman culture, obviously something from the classical periods, and most importantly, we've been focusing on Shakespeare today, I think are just going to, as you said, improve our IQ and probably give us an opportunity to understand the world more fully. And so I would encourage our listeners, of course, you want to read your Bibles, but also, as I said before, you go back to a home maybe 100 years ago, complete works of William Shakespeare in the Bible. That's what people were reading. And then you see it showing up in some of the speeches, whether it's Abraham Lincoln or whether it's some of the great orators at the time. Today, when all these kids are actually consuming information in 140 characters or 280 characters, and they're jumping around and they can't sit still enough to read a book, I think this would be a great antidote to this kind of high-tech culture that's turning a lot of these kids into sort of something that looks like ADD.
Well, that's from that. There's a high rate of ADD right now. But it's interesting that you mentioned Euclid, because there is Euclidean stuff in Shakespeare as well. There's all new astronomy. There's sort of a little bit of a debate between Copernican and Ptolemaic astronomy. It's like I said, it's packed with so much stuff you don't even know that you're getting kind of brain nutrients while you're enjoying it. And I think a lot of people aren't really aware of that, and that's why I said I called it a crib sheet, because it does provide a basis for a lot of these other offshoots that we get now, and kids are often taught what people think they need to know. But the thing is, it's really hard to know what people are going to need 10, 20, 30 years down the line. So it is about building a strong foundation for the house.
Well, again, Helen Mirren talks about the fact that it combines a love of Shakespeare and gardening, but also I was struck by the fact that you have a number of other endorsements, like David McCullough said it was a visual and literary banquet, and a number of other issues. So this is a book that I think most people should be able to find in their local bookstores. And for some of our teachers out there, or some of those individuals that love gardening and have never even thought about that connection, it fills a niche and a need. And so I know you've been traveling around doing a number of interviews, and I appreciate you giving us some time today here on Point of View.
Well, my pleasure. And I'm always happy to help out teachers or anybody else who needs, some insights or some materials to help, get the fun across in the learning.
And I think that's one of the things that we really need to educate all the next generation to do, because we are going to have to put, I hate to say it, a lot more fun into learning. Because if you are growing up with a digital device in your lap, unfortunately, some of these 2-year-olds have an iPad in their lap, they're so used to everything being entertaining. And as a result, it's going to take a little bit more to get their attention. And even I began to notice that when I started talking about the Sesame Street generation, where they are so used to everything being bright, colorful, fast-moving, and then they have to sit still in a classroom while somebody's lecturing. I'm sad to say we've conditioned them at a very young age to not pay attention. And so it's going to take a lot more work on the part of our teachers to get people involved, these young people involved in some of these activities. So I appreciate the fact that you're providing that for some of our listeners as well. So, Gerit, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into some of the issues here, one of which is we'll see whether or not the president is indeed going to sign that legislation. I think he probably will. The only alternative he would have is to push us into another shutdown. But for somebody who was asking for $5.7 billion to get $1.4 billion, I don't know. So we'll see where that takes us. And then I do want to address this issue of sexual abuse in Southern Baptist churches. And so there are some very important issues related to that. The article I've posted today is by our good friend Jim Dennison in the Dennison Forum, in which he kind of takes us through the need for us to have compassion for those that have actually been abused, to really begin to understand how many are credibly accused and how that kind of fits into the overall picture, and then the need for us to see what we can do to prevent that from happening in the future. So I'm going to try to cover that. But again, if you have some comments or questions about this latest revelation that came out primarily through the Houston paper, but through some other venues as well, we will spend some time getting into those topics. And then I might just mention in the next hour, we are going to have John Humphrey in studio with us. I Am Second. Maybe you are familiar with the I Am Second videos, and there are so many individuals that we've interviewed on this program that are part of those I Am Second videos. So I think that's going to be a great opportunity to hear a little bit more about that as another great evangelistic tool for you to use, and also just a great testimony from different individuals that have sat in that chair, the I Am Second chair, and share their testimony. Some, by the way, sharing their testimony about sexual abuse, which is the topic we'll get to right after this.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare. And they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Watching what happens now because Monday night, last night, the congressional negotiators came up with a plan, and this would be one that would provide less money for building the wall or the barrier or fence or whatever you want to call it. But the border wall, originally a request was $5.7 billion. This one is a much smaller amount, about $1.4 billion, according to congressional aides. Now, what's so interesting is I kind of wonder where all the rest of that money goes, because this still theoretically suggests that another 55 miles of new fencing could be constructed. In some respects, maybe because now they're using the fencing, the metal slats that we've talked about here before, instead of a concrete wall. And this would actually be built primarily in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So we'll see whether or not that is the case. Now, the way Congress oftentimes has functioned in the past is, Republicans have one offer, Democrats have another, and theoretically they meet in the middle, 50-50. Now, my Republican friends sometimes say, well, in the past it's always been Republicans and Democrats meet 3/4 of the way to where the Democrats want it, and they get 1/4 and Democrats get 3/4. But I've heard some Democrats say just the opposite. But the bottom line is that this is very significantly less than what was being requested by the president, but it is more than zero than what was being suggested by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or by the Senate Minority Leader. So Chuck Schumer. So I will see. I think this is one of those times in which, let's hope, if nothing else, that particular piece of legislation is signed. The continuing resolution continues on. We don't have a shutdown. Both sides will claim a victory, although I do fear a little bit on the reaction that a Nancy Pelosi will receive, at least from some of the more radical elements of the Democrat Party. Because if you said we're not giving $1 to fencing and to the border wall, and then you give away more than $1 billion and allocate, I guess it'd probably be a better word, allocate more than $1 billion, I can see that some are going to be very upset with her. So if you would like to actually address that issue, 1-800-351-1212. The president said he's unhappy, but will he sign it when he's unhappy or not? We'll kind of pay attention to that as the day unfolds, and tomorrow as well. The first article we've posted here for you is by our good friends Jim Dennison at the Dennison Forum, and he said he was writing this daily article yesterday with a grieving heart. He said, I became a Christian in a Southern Baptist Sunday school class and was baptized in a Southern Baptist church. I was licensed and ordained as a vocational minister in that church. I attended college at a Texas Baptist University and graduate school at a Southern Baptist seminary. I taught on the seminary's faculty and pastored 4 churches affiliated in various ways with the Southern Baptist Convention. I think you can see he's got pretty good Southern Baptist credentials. Okay, he says, let's talk about the positives. Southern Baptists support nearly 9,000 missionaries around the world, are training more than 22,000 seminary students, served more than 2.9 million meals last year to those in need, and assist in crisis with practical compassion. That's actually an HTML link. You might want to follow that because it's fascinating to see, if you haven't ever done so, what are the Baptist men doing when you have Hurricane Katrina, when you have a flood, when you have whatever, It's fascinating just to see all the things that various Southern Baptist volunteers have done. God has used Southern Baptists to share the gospel with multiplied millions of people around the world. And so then he says, in the midst of all that, we have the story that appeared in the Houston Chronicle, which says 20 years, 700 victims, Southern Baptist sexual abuse spreads as leaders resist reforms. Now, one of the reasons I want to do this is to give credit to the study that was done, but also really challenge, even in the headline, some of the things that are said. Is that fair? I mean, we do that with anything else, not trying to be defensive about real abuse that has taken place. But as we have talked about so often, sometimes we need a little bit of discernment. So again, he points out that reporters at the Houston Chronicle, as well as the San Antonio Express News, began an investigation last year to compile an archive of allegations of sexual abuse sexual assault, and other serious misconduct involving Southern Baptist pastors and other church officials. And again, Jim Dennison gives us a very good, clear understanding. He said what they discovered is tragic. Let's take them by the numbers. 380 credibly accused leaders. The reporters found complaints made against hundreds of pastors, church officials, and volunteers in Southern Baptist churches nationwide. They focused their search on the last 20 years, concentrating on individuals who had a documented connection to a church listed in a Southern Baptist Convention directory published by a state or national association. They spent more than 6 months reviewing thousands of pages of court, prison, and police records from more than 20 states, conducting hundreds of interviews, and they also searched sex offender registries nationwide. Looks like it was pretty thorough indeed. Let's get into it a little bit more. Ultimately, the reporters compiled information on 380, what they said, 380 credibly accused officials in Southern Baptist churches, including pastors, deacons, Sunday school teachers, and volunteer leaders. They verified that about 220 had been convicted of sex crimes or received deferred prosecutions in plea deals. They learned that at least 35 church pastors, employees, and volunteers who exhibited predatory behavior were able to find jobs at churches over the last 2 decades. In some cases, church leaders apparently failed to alert law enforcement or warn other congregations. And in some respects, they get into some of the things that were done. Since it's a family-oriented program, you can use your imagination to talk about what we're talking about there. Okay, so what has been the response? Well, if you listen to this program, you know that we have, at least on one occasion, interviewed the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, J.D. Greer, and he called the abuses described in the investigation pure evil. And he said, I join with countless others who are currently weeping with those who weep. Now, of course, that's a reference to the book of Romans. We have Russell Moore. He's been on the program twice, I think, with us as well, president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, called the report nothing short of a scandal and a crisis, and added there should be no tolerance for or covering up sexual abuse of the vulnerable ever, especially within the Church of Jesus Christ. Even one victim of sexual abuse by a Southern Baptist meter would grieve the heart of God, but hundreds, of course, is horrifying. Okay, how do we think about this, first of all, biblically? And then how do we think about whether or not some of the report maybe goes a little too far? So I'm going to try in both cases to be as fair as I can, but you are welcome to join the conversation today. 1-800-351-1212. But before we take a break, let me take on some of the scriptural principles here. And that is in 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18, flee sexual immorality. Probably very, very clear. In 1 Thessalonians 4:3, this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality. We can take some others. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4, God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. And Colossians 3:5, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. And then some of the other scriptural verses would be obviously that a person in a position of leadership, that obviously would be a pastor, it would be a Sunday school leader, it would be a deacon, an elder, a volunteer. We can see this in 1 Timothy 3, and sort of repeated as well as in Titus 1, but certainly 1 Timothy 3 has the qualifications for an elder, qualifications for a person in leadership. And it says an overseer, probably the best way to translate that, must be above reproach. And even in the book of James 3, we have that James warned that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. So those are some very important issues. Now, when we come back, I want to run some numbers. Now, this is in no way to try to downplay the nature of what we're talking about here, but you have to begin to recognize you can look at this in two different ways. Let's look at all the Southern Baptists. That's 15 million Southern Baptists that are alive right now, but you have millions of others over the last 20 years that have passed away. So that number is, who knows, more than 20 million, but don't know exactly what that is. And then when you compare that to the number, that's a smaller number indeed. It's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent. But I think the other one we'll look at is what Jim Dennison does and look at the credible reports and then says, okay, let's look at how many probably Southern Baptist leaders there are. And that is certainly a case. And then I can see our first caller wants to address another issue, and that is the fact that Southern Baptist churches are autonomous. That's no excuse, but it's just a reality that because they are, you don't have as large an ecclesiastical structure over it as you have in other denominations. So I want to get into some of those issues. I'll let Stephen, who is our first caller, kind of get into that, but I'll give you some numbers and some context right after these important messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Veterans Memorials are symbols meant to remind the living of the service and sacrifice the fallen made for freedom. That is why Gold Star Mothers in 1919 started work on the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial. They did not want the world to forget the sacrifice their sons made, so they, along with the American Legion, erected a cross-shaped memorial. The design mirrored the universally accepted symbol erected over the thousands of graves of men who died in Europe defending freedom. No one complained for almost 100 years. Recently, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit refused to overturn an opinion of a panel of that court that would direct a federal district court to consider whether the monument should have its horizontal arms removed or be razed to the ground completely. Such a decision sets a dangerous precedent for veterans memorials across America. If this decision stands, other memorials will be targeted for destruction as well. First Liberty Institute will appeal this case to the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of its clients, the American Legion. I encourage you to go to don'ttearmedown.com and join us in defending this memorial to the 49 men of Prince George's County, Maryland, killed in the line of duty during World War I. We forget what we do not see. Unless the Supreme Court intervenes, the Bladensburg Memorial and similar memorials in close by Arlington National Cemetery may disappear as well. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Just joining us, we're talking a little bit for just a few minutes, and we'll come back to this because this is not an issue that's going to go away, but some of the reports that come from the Houston Chronicle as well as the San Antonio Express News of hundreds of victims of sexual abuse in Southern Baptist churches. And just before we take some phone calls, let me just again use some numbers. This is in no way trying to minimize any of this, but at the same time helping you understand that when you're talking about something very large, like the Catholic Church, something very large like the Southern Baptist Convention, when you hear those numbers, it's like, oh, because even one is a tragedy. So not misleading that, not trying to downplay all of that at all. But again, if you use the smaller number, 220 convicted offenders out of 15 million Southern Baptists, and of course many have passed away, so it's probably more like 20 million, but we'll use the 15 million or something like that. It's 1/10 of, actually no, it's 1/10 0.010% if you use that. But the number that is posted on our website, which is one by Jim Dennison, looked at it a different way, which I thought was striking because he says, you know, as horrific as this tragedy is, it is still a small portion. You're going to have people over the next couple of days painting with an incredibly broad brush and saying that this is why you cannot go to a Southern Baptist church because they're a bunch of predators, which is obviously hyperbole at the greatest amount. But again, he helps us get some perspective. There are 47,000 Baptist churches in the United States. If each church had just one pastor, 5 deacons, and 10 Sunday school teachers, which would be kind of the smallest church you could possibly imagine. So that's taking a very small number of those leaders, and then multiplying that, obviously, by 47,000, you'd have 752,000 Baptist leaders. Then if you look at the higher number, the 380 credibly accused, not just the 220 that actually prosecuted, you would come up with, again, 0.0005% of the total. That's not trying to downplay it, but it is trying to put it in perspective. But there's another issue, and I was going to bring it up, but I can see that our next caller, Stephen, in Georgia, wants to bring it up. So, Stephen, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
And again, talk about this idea of the Southern Baptist Church, because they are autonomous. Talk about that.
Absolutely. In 1636, it began with Roger Williams in Providence, Rhode Island. That's the first Baptist church in America. And you know what? He wasn't a Southern Baptist. There's over 100 Baptist denominations. And you know what? I've been Southern Baptist a long period of time. I think that they claim a little bit too much in terms of an organization. There's a lot of bureaucracy. But you know what? Every church is autonomous. They can be giving money to the Southern Baptist Convention, and then they can give to somebody else like the General Baptist Conference. And so every church is autonomous. It comes down to a local suit. Somebody's accused of sexual abuse, it will come down to the court. It has nothing to do with the bureaucracy of the Southern Baptist Convention. Not at all.
And I think that's a good point, because some people said, well, you can't hide behind it. But I'm saying it goes both ways. First of all, there isn't a overarching ecclesiastical structure like the Catholic Church, where there's been accusations, I think have been verified, that a priest that was involved in some kind of sexual activity, and again, I'm using euphemisms, but I think we all know what we're talking about here, then got transferred to another parish. That does not really exist in the Southern Baptist Convention. But here's the other part of that. We don't know, because of the study that was done by the Houston Chronicle and others, whether or not some of that has been dealt with locally, because we, unless you want to go to all 47,000 churches and find out how they dealt with those issues, you probably have some where, sadly, and this is where I think the churches have to start thinking about what they're going to do. Maybe they did catch somebody and it was not purported to law enforcement, and so that person was allowed to leave and then sneak into another church and maybe perpetrate that. My experience of a church locally here, and I won't name it, but I think it's pretty obvious for anybody that's been watching the news, is where there was a pastor that tried to solicit something online with a minor. Turns out he was soliciting online with a law enforcement individual. That person indeed was prosecuted and went to jail. And so that would have been one of those individuals that I don't know, because they didn't have all the court records there, but I don't know if he actually had ever been involved with another individual, but it would have shown up as one of those individuals who was indeed prosecuted and imprisoned, incarcerated. So you always don't know all the facts, but again, the autonomy of the Southern Baptist Convention's another issue. And I certainly want to put both the compassionate concern that we have talked about so often in terms of sexual abuse on the table, but also at least want to give a little bit of context to that, which as Christians, I think we'd be willing to give it, and maybe some of the secular press will not. So, Stephen, I so appreciate you calling in today.
I appreciate it, too. It comes down to if there's sexual abuse, it will go to the court. A judge will decide, and it doesn't have anything to do with the local church, except they may fire the pastor and under the suspicion of. That can happen.
That certainly can. Stephen, I appreciate it. And you might be saying, okay, I'm not in a Southern Baptist church, although I would imagine a fair number of you are. Are there some lessons we can learn from it? Lesson number one, if you suspect abuse, report it. I hate to say that, but better to have an occasional false positive than to turn a blind eye to someone who's being abused. And we've talked on this program before with individuals that were abused who then reported it to individuals, and the reaction, I think, decades ago was, no, I can't believe that. No, he's a fine, upstanding person in the community. He's a pastor in the church. Oh, he's a deacon. No, I can't believe that. And so there was sometimes a tendency to not believe that, or to wipe it away, or to sweep it under the rug, or whatever metaphor you want to use. Then there were those that were saying, this would be scandalous. We have a building program right now or something. And, so again, those individuals certainly deserve all the condemnation we can give to them because they were willing to excuse a sin in their midst without addressing it. But there's another obvious action item, and that is to do what you can to make sure that the people that indeed are serving you in the church are not going to be individuals that might actually engage in, I guess, again, I'll use the euphemism, sexual immorality. And I know that I sit on certain boards where they actually do a background check on me. I serve on a board. I don't even minister to it. I can't even imagine that you wouldn't have in your children's area background checks and a variety of others. Is it possible for people that are pedophiles and others, people that are sexual abusers, to skate beneath some of the screening? Of course. But we have to do what I would say all due diligence, and I think we can learn some very sad lessons from the story that's come out about the Southern Baptist Convention. And as I said before, this is not the first time we have talked about this issue. Believe me, it will not be the last time. And as a matter of fact, there are going to be some other kind of follow-up programs I'd like to do to address that. But I did want to, since it was in the news, I was not on the program yesterday, bring it up today, let you know I pay attention to it. I think it really needs to be addressed. I think our good friend Jim Dennison did a very good job, and that article is available to you on our website, pointofview.net. On a lighter note, let me just mention also that my commentary today is on biblical archaeology. Why did I write that? Well, back in December, Christianity Today published an article called Biblical Archaeology's Top 10 Discoveries. This has been a banner year last year for archaeological discoveries or for new technologies, which has allowed us to see some of the things in these archaeological discoveries. So that is there. And if you'd like to see some of those archaeological discoveries face-to-face, don't forget we have a trip to Israel that's taking place in October. So go to the website, pointofview.net, click on the banner that says Go to Israel with Kerby. I think you would enjoy our trip to Israel and to Rome. Let's take a break. We're going to be talking about I Am Second, and we'll have John Humphrey in studio right after this.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. This hour we're going to be talking about I Am Second, and if you're not familiar with that ministry, you'll find out about it in just a few minutes. I would suspect many of you have seen some of the videos, and again, this is kind of a twofer because we also have the individual that so often brings people into the studio, Sue Bailey, who's with the Hope Center, and we'll be also talk about the Critical Conversation series coming up here on sexual trafficking, another topic. So first of all, Sue, just always great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Kerby. It's always delightful to be here. I enjoy it. It's a highlight of my month.
Yes. Well, and I might just mention we have a link here to the Critical Conversations hosted by the Hope Center. Now, I recognize that we are broadcasting to the national audience. Some of you may not be able to come here, although you might want to get in an airplane and do that because, first of all, you're going to have a couple of great opportunities to meet some key people. Dr. Vanessa Boucher. Some of our listeners might say, Boucher, I've heard that name before. Yeah, we've had Noel Boucher on this program many times, haven't we?
Yes, we have, actually, last month.
Yeah, so again, they're married, and of course, not only is Noel best known for Pure Hope and all the issues of addiction, pornography, and things like that, but she is an associate professor of political science at a major university nearby here and has become kind of an expert. I've seen her name in a lot of venues about sexual trafficking. And so it is just great to have her there alone just to really address some of these issues of sexual trafficking, right?
Yes, she is known as an expert in this arena, and it's mostly because of it touched her personally when she and Noel were in New York studying and going to school, and they became passionate about these causes. Obviously, Noel with the whole pornography issue that leads oftentimes into that sex trafficking problem. And then Vanessa just felt that a calling to actually do something about this situation. So she knows many, many people, and she's often called on from Washington, D.C. to provide statistics. She does research. She does studies. She is a wealth of information, and we are really blessed to have her be with us.
So she'll be at that event. And then also George Lynch, who I've heard a lot about, and I think you're going to try to get him in studio here because he's with, Traffic 911, right?
Traffic 911. So Vanessa will bring that kind of intellectual research and statistical information to us on human trafficking, and then, of course, underneath that, the sexual trafficking. And then George actually runs Traffic 911. It is a local nonprofit that the goal is to bring these victims out from their, the situation that they're held captive in with this sex trafficking. And he does a lot of legislature work here in the state of Texas as well. And he also does a lot in the criminal court system to help these ladies come out successfully.
So again, I'm just really impressed with that. February 26th, that's that Tuesday night. If you're marking your calendar, that's one, February 26th. Let me mark one more, and that's February 27th. That's the oral arguments on the Bladensburg Cross. You and I were hearing about that even today, and we've had Kelly Shackelford. Matter of fact, we're going to have Lathan Watts. You had a chance to hear him. He's going to be sitting in that chair in just a minute. But the person that is sitting in the chair, somebody I've known for a number of years as well, John Humphrey. And again, he joined I Am Second in 2008. And if you would like to know what he did before, we have his whole bio, but I'll just mention a few. He was involved in various companies like Lorimar, ProServe, and especially Vision Quest Communications Group. And if you've ever seen the Heart of a Champion Foundation, this is the guy. So, John, it is great to have you in studio here as well.
Well, thank you for having me. We have known each other for a long period of time, and this is the first time we've actually conducted an interview.
You know, and it's so funny because I've even had your sister-in-law's signs in my yard because she ran for school board. So, you know, I've known the family and extended family for some time.
That's right.
And one of the fun things about this is we all are on the second floor in the Hope Center. So lots of times we see each other in the hallway or something like that. And if you are not familiar with the I Am Second, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But I was telling John that I kind of made the short list here, and this is just a short list of all these videos of people that we've interviewed in studio that you've done videos with. And I remember back in 2 studios ago, so this goes back decades now, one of the first interviews we did from an I Am Second video was Brian Head Welch, who has gone through a little bit of a metamorphosis. But when he came in the studio, there were people, even in the newsroom, looking around, who is this? Well, of course, anybody that knows music knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And then I was making the short list here. Eric Metaxas, Michael W. Smith, Clint Glesham was on recently, Tony Evans, Tony Dungy was in the studio just a while ago, Ken Hutchinson, Chris Plekenpole, Janine Turner, Jack Graham, Jarrett Stevens, Mike Huckabee, just to mention a few. And that's just a small list of just an enormous number of videos you've put together. So tell us a little bit more. I would imagine right now, if people are listening to this first time, they will find the link to I Am Second. They'll start watching those videos, and it'll be like binge watching because you want to watch another one, another one, another one. But tell the story if you might.
Well, the story of what we do, it really boils down to 2 areas. And first is that we lift up Jesus through digital and other types of media.
Right.
And tell stories of people whose lives have been transformed. That's the starting point. The second thing, though, we do is we build bridges for those people to connect with places where they can be discipled, where they can grow, where they can go ahead and to take another step in their faith development. And so by those 2 actions, we feel that we help people to become second and also to live second.
And one of the things they'll find is if they go to iamsecond, or spelled out.com, they'll start seeing videos, and every one of them has a person sitting in what? A white chair. And that was genius, I think, when you first started doing that, because you have a chance to have them tell their story. Obviously, you're having some questions, and you've got to do some cutaways and things like that, but not a lot of advanced technology, but enough production values that they're just really gripping, and there's an opportunity for you to hear stories of athletes, comedians, actors, leaders, political leaders, all sorts of people. I sort of gave you a little bit of a feel for some of the kinds of people there, as well as some people you've never heard of before that have a very compelling story about, in some way or another, how indeed Jesus changed their life.
Well, and there was intentionality in the setup for our production that we went through back in 2007, actually in preparation for the launch in 2008. And when we got in the late 2008, we launched with 15 different films. Now, in preparing for that, we went through all sorts of iterations of what could the set look like. And we came with the white chair because it was somewhat of an iconic looking type of a chair that was available and fit the simple background that we were trying to put in there. But we also dressed people in just a plain shirt.
Right.
And we did that on purpose because whether you are an entertainer or a singer or an athlete or a mom or a student, in Christ, we are all the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. You know, we don't have this hierarchy based upon what we do.
Let's take a break. I want to talk a little bit more about that. And again, encourage you right now, if you've never been there, we already have a link to iamsecond.com. Of course, we have a link to the Hope Center. We'll talk about that again in just a minute. And we are talking about 2 different issues, sexual trafficking and I Am Second, but really they come together because some of the testimonies are about trafficking, sexual abuse, and the rest. And some of the people I mentioned, by the way, have dealt with that. So we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we can cover 2 different issues.
Yes,
and a little bit later, I'm going to open up the phones. I suspect some of you have seen the I Am Second videos. Maybe even 1 or 2 of you became Christians because of them. So I'd love to hear from you. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Last year was a significant year in the field of biblical archaeology. One article in Christianity Today detailed biblical archaeology's top 10 discoveries. Some were recent finds, others were finds that new technology has helped read inscriptions not previously visible. Here are a few examples. When ISIS terrorists captured Mosul, they blew up the tomb of the prophet Jonah. This uncovered the remains of a palace of the Assyrian king Esarhaddon. As one article put it, ISIS accidentally corroborates the Bible, and inscriptions found in the old city of Nineveh give an order of the Assyrian kings that matches the biblical order. An inscribed piece of limestone discovered in a tomb along the west bank of the Nile was revealed to be a Semitic abecedary. It dates back to the time of Moses and fits with a statement that Moses wrote down everything the Lord had said, and it turns out he wasn't the only one writing in a Semitic script in Egypt at the time. A seal impression found in the ancient Jerusalem wall mentions the governor of the city. Governors of the city of Jerusalem are mentioned in the Old Testament, and one seal impression found apparently says Isaiah the prophet. It is with other seals with King Hezekiah of Judah. And a ring with the name Pontius Pilate on it was excavated decades ago, but only could be read recently due to advanced photographic techniques. The ring is not fancy enough to have been worn by Pilate. It probably was worn by someone authorized to act on his authority and would use it to seal official communications. This is really an exciting time in biblical archaeology. These and other finds further establish the historical reliability of the Bible. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, in theaters February 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Have Sue Bailey in studio with us. I am second with John Humphrey. And again, if you would like to find out a little bit more information, the Hope Center is thehopecenter.org, or you can do thehopecenter.org/critical conversations.
That's right.
Either way, or go to events, you'll find it there. IamSecond.com, which is going to be real easy. And we were just talking a minute ago about that white chair. I mean, it's brilliant because when you see it and then when people are dressed the way they are, it forces you to focus on what is being said. The problem I've always had about video is when you watch a video, you spend so much time looking at their gestures, their clothes, and everything like that. This is why I've always loved the medium of radio, especially when you look like I do. Radio's a lot better anyway. But the bottom line is because then it focuses on the content. And you found a way that even though it's visually interesting, you really focus on the content, and the content is powerful because some of them are telling such heart-rending stories that I don't know how you as film production people make it through without just breaking down and crying on the floor because they're really powerful, aren't they?
Oh, especially if you're filming 3 or 4 of them in a day, which we sometimes do. By the end of the day, you are just totally exhausted.
Yeah, yes.
And it's not from physical exertion.
Right. It's that emotional pull.
Absolutely. And so, yes, it's heart-rending, but it's also very cathartic for the people that come in and tell their story.
Yes.
And they come in a little bit terrified and they're being very transparent here.
Yeah.
And bold in sharing their story, and they don't know what's going to happen afterwards. And then they get into the chair, and there's usually some spiritual warfare that's taking place in their life. but they power through, and they get to the end and they say, wow, this was really something. I said things that I never thought that I would share before, but they made so much sense in the conversation. And then after the fact, they're just overwhelmed with the comments that they get for having shared their story and to see how people are impacted by their story.
Well, and again, we are talking about individuals that have been through all sorts of drug abuse, sexual abuse, people that have lost limbs, or people that have been hurt themselves or hurt other people, people that have had success, but it was empty for them. And so in some respects, it is just the whole look at the human experience and always coming back to the fact that I am second. He's first and I am second. And that was another just genius to just simply be able to tag that. I know when people saw that, I am second, what is it? We saw billboards all along and everything like that. It created a great deal of curiosity and drove people to the website, didn't it?
Well, the mysterious aspect of it was very much part of the launch. But the story behind that is that when we were talking with our founder, Norm Miller, who was helping to found.
I wanted to mention his name, so I'm glad you did. Yeah.
And the creative aspect behind it was, how can we get people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at the time to go ahead and really say, look at how God is working. What if there was a sports star in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who most people think sports stars, when they win, they're very successful, to say, well, I'm number one or we're number one. But what if that sports star said, no, I'm not number one. I'm really number two. Here is number one. And so hence that led into the slogan, I am second. Now, we've had lots of people go ahead over the years and say, well, what about I am third?
Yes, I've heard that too.
Yeah, Kanika, there's I'm third.
And we don't dispute that. But what we say is you're putting God and others ahead of yourself.
Yes. Right. And again, I might just mention, since you did mention I was going to get to Norm Miller in just a minute, I was going to mention something else, and this is something that's grown out of E3 Ministries. And this, again, dates me, since I'm the oldest guy around the table. The first interview I ever did was with what was called Global Missions Fellowship with a guy by the name of Mike Downey.
Right.
And that is a time when he and a guy by the name of Curtis Hale and one other people were all there was in that organization. So you have come in, I guess, in 2008, but, since I'm the old guy, I've seen this explode, and that's another part of the ministry because, of course, you are going all over the world founding churches, right?
Absolutely. And, when we founded I Am Second, it was a brand new venture. It didn't really come out of the church planting aspect of things. But as time has gone on, we've been able to identify how they complement one another very well.
Oh, yes.
And, offer the opportunity for people who come to faith in Christ and who are inspired through Christ to go ahead and to grow deeper, to move into applications for their spiritual life, in sharing the gospel with other people or helping to go overseas and serve in missions.
I might just mention the phones are already ringing, so I might as well just open up the phones. 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some of those calls in just a minute. And don't forget, we are talking, of course, about I Am Second with John Humphrey, but also Sue Bailey is with us. And, of course, we'll get into, in just a minute, those critical conversations. But I thought for another couple of minutes, as people go to iamsecond.com, they can look at the films. And that's reason enough for individuals. But, John, I know there are a lot of pastors, Sunday school leaders, small group leaders that say, this would be great to show this little video clip to illustrate a point that I was going to make in a sermon or a Sunday school lesson, or maybe this could be part of an evangelistic outreach that our church could do. Talk about how some people could use some of the resources that you have there on the website.
Sure. There have been a lot of churches and even individuals who have gone ahead and taken it into their schools, who have used the tools that we have available in the films and some other supporting material that they can download, and have turned that into lessons or sermon series for a while there, and it's kind of passed away, and we're getting ready to revamp it. We actually had a church kit that was available for churches to use. It's been a little bit dated, and so now we're updating it. But definitely they can go ahead, and the application is perfect. They can take the story and then go back to the Bible, or they can go to the Bible and then run the story for today. And it just really fits very nicely.
Let's take a phone call. Maybe put your headphones on there for just a minute, or the earbuds. And then a little bit later, I want to talk about Ryan Head Welch and some of the testimony there, as well as some of the other resources. Of course, we also want to talk about this idea of some resources that people can use, not only, of course, in terms of I Am Second, but even the Critical Conversation series you have at the Hope Center. But let's take a phone call real quickly. We'll head out to Georgia first on the Good News Network. Scott, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Yeah, when I was listening to this, I had the great privilege of being at the Museum of the Bible this past Friday, and they've got this neat little booth they're calling the Joshua Machine, where they invite you to get inside the booth and to just be transparent and tell how the Bible has impacted your life. And it just reminded me of this I Am Second concept, but in this, obviously in this case, just general normal people can get in here, and they will actually, they'll screen it, of course, to make sure it's good. But then it comes up in the museum on all their in their actual area where they show these videos, and they're even working on an app to where you could do this and categorize your testimony and how the Bible has impacted you, and you can go in the app at any time and say, "Man, I'm having a hard time in this area of my life."
Isn't that great?
And it'll show you videos of people who have had victory over these things through the Bible. So I just, the whole concept of Christians sharing how the Bible has worked in their life, I think it's wonderful, because people forget that the Bible is not just a book; it's our manual for living the Christian life.
Right.
Well, again, we've had some of the Green family in studio with us before. Yes. But, John, you're smiling because you know the rest of the story, so tell us.
Well, a couple things. First of all, if you go down the hall from the Joshua Tree area, you can find a kiosk that shows I Am Second people talking about the impact of the Bible.
That's right.
And so that's one aspect of it. But secondly, you also have the ability to talk about your own personal story at iamsecond.com by going to Share My Story. And you can go ahead and do a 2-minute similar type of a video that can be submitted to us. We don't necessarily share those publicly, but we do have the opportunity for you to be able to share those.
Let me talk about that for just a minute, because when you go to iamsecond.com and click on the Share My Story, then there's an opportunity for you to do that, and then you can submit it. They even give you some tips for filming and some edits and things like that, so they can really take this story that is, first of all, I just love what's going on at the Museum of the Bible.
Yes.
We went
last November.
That's what happens when you spend $500 million on a museum.
Yes.
So that's one of the other advantages of being associated with the Hope Center. But again, I love what they're doing, but also you can do that yourself right now by going to iamsecond.com. And again, just click on that second button there that says Share My Story. And when we come back, I want to talk again about this critical conversation taking place. We've been talking about sexual trafficking, and this is something which would put you in touch with some very significant individuals. And again, I recognize some of you are not in the Dallas area, but if you maybe are involved in this area or know someone that does, I'd get on an airplane and come in and join them. And you're serving dinner this time, right?
We are serving dinner.
Goodness.
We are ramping it up.
This is going to be nice. So we're going to take a break. We got a lot more to cover, but we have one of those mandatory breaks. So we'll take a break, continue our conversation with Sue Bailey and John Humphrey right after this.
Roadside Attractions presents Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question.
It's all part of his plan, right?
God does love you. He loves you like crazy.
From executive producers Tim Tebow and Robbie Tebow, Run the Race. Rated PG, parental guidance suggested. In theaters February 22nd. More information is available at runtheracemovie.com.
Jesus said you could find a person's heart by where they invest their money. We at Point of View could not be more thankful that so many demonstrate a love for truth and for this nation by investing in our common mission. Of course, the reality is our team, our truth team, is a small percentage of those who listen. And right now, as they say in sports, we could use a deeper bench. For those who have given, thank you. And if you haven't made that step yet, take one now. Go to pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Show your heart for our future. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, and we have Sue Bailey with us with the Hope Center, as well as John Humphrey with I Am Second. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, thehopecenter.org, and you can also put /critical conversations. But let's talk about the Hope Center for just a minute, because this has been just a game changer. It's an overused term, but it really has for many ministries, including John's ministry and mine. And again, tell us how many people are in the Hope Center and what actually is taking place there.
Well, there's 40 plus ministries in that 185,000 square foot building, and there's probably about 350 to 400 people that are coming in and out working there. And it's actually a one of a kind and a collaborative center that was the kind of dream of some Christian leaders here in the Dallas area, and they put their time and talent and resources together, and primarily June Hunt, and built that building in 2008, opened the doors, and it's been full ever since. One of the remarkable things is that we do charge half price rent. So a building in Plano goes for about $30 a square foot. We charge our ministries, like I'm Second, about $16 a square foot. We have a large conference center that'll hold 350, 400 people. And if I'm Second wants to have a big dinner or luncheon or whatever, they can use it for free. So there are remarkable benefits, but it is kingdom work, and that's what we want to support. And so that's what I have the honor of doing is bringing friends around the Hope Center and taking tours and showing off ministries like I Am Second. It's one of my favorite ministries to tour because of the iconic white chair, which is there at the Hope Center.
And the signatures.
And then what happened spontaneously is the first person that went in the white chair signed the back of the chair. And so now we have over 100, I believe, signatures on the back of the chair.
That's amazing.
And the visitors always do the ooh gasp when they see that. And then the other thing that I love about I'm Second is they have a resource. It's a book.
Yes.
And it's the stories of the I'm Second videos that are in that book. And I always recommend it to someone who has a teen in their life, because teens are facing some real struggles in our culture today. And a lot of those stories are encouraging, empowering of how people who faced a similar type of struggle have turned to God and the Bible to come through it. And teens need that.
Well, and you'll be happy to know that the books will continue. We've got our next book coming out this fall called I Choose Peace.
I love it.
With more of the stories from the I'm Second website. But getting back to the Hope Center, you know, it has been a blessing for E3 partners as well as I'm Second over these almost 10 years that it's been open. And, you know, we shoot I'm Second films right there in the Hope Center.
Yeah, I've seen that.
In the conference room. And you know, the amenities that are available to us, we would just never even come close if we were having offices separately. And the quality of the amenities is unbelievable as well. Just to have the different spaces that are available to collaborate and to have fellowship with other ministries. It has just been a huge resource for our ministry, and I know for all the others that are in the Hope Center.
I remember a while back I was walking through and somebody said, Kerby, and I look over at Eric Matex. I said, what are you doing here? I'm actually recording an I Am Second video. So he took me back there. And that happens all the time because I'll have somebody that is right now. Somebody called me the other day and they had just been in Philippines and then they were in South Korea, and it's kind of a meeting place. And sometimes just going to get the mail, I'll run into half a dozen people that are there for a conference. And you know as well as I do, John, how that's helpful as well, because there's a kind of a synergism that needs to take place, because you're there with E3 Ministries, but on the next floor is East-West Ministries. And, of course, some of my former staff members work there. And then, you know as well as I do, Sue, we have different orphan ministries that all work together.
Oh, yeah.
And this is how the body of Christ is supposed to work.
It's supposed to work that way.
But by putting everybody in the same building, in a really nice building, by the way, too, this is something that should be happening to ministries across the country, but it really is happening there in very significant ways.
We often have people come in and visit the Hope Center we just had a group in from Charlotte, North Carolina last week, and they're very interested in Hope Center in their community. And it does not have to look like the Hope Center in Plano. It could be a repurposed building. It could be many different things. But we would love to have anybody that's interested in having a Hope Center in their area contact us, come visit us. We'll talk to them. I'll give tours if you want to come in town. we will give a tour and show you all the ministries and all the kind of behind-the-scenes things.
You know, I give tours too, but I need to come back to that white chair, you know, because usually I'm taking them to where they are interested. Either they're interested in the legal stuff, so I take them to First Liberty, or if they're interested in the apologetic stuff, I take them to Josh McDowell and Probe, whatever. But that's just another opportunity. Let's just, before we get back to I Am Second, because I have more things I want to ask John, we again have coming up here on the 26th, Tuesday, February 26th, an opportunity to hear Dr. Vanessa Boucher and George Lynch. You know as well as I do that I've been able to sponsor tables in the past, but I want to get some of our listeners out here to think about sponsoring a table or to attend. How can they do so?
They can do so by going on the website. They can hit the scroll over to the events, or they can just put / critical conversations, and they can attend the dinner for $40, or they can be a sponsor for $500 and have a table of 8. And there are sponsor benefits that you get to meet our guests. And I want to also just add that there will be about 12 other nonprofits that are working in the area of human trafficking. And in fact, E3 and I'm Second will be one of those ministries we highlight, because they do work in that area, as we've just been talking about. But several other nonprofits that are working in the area of human trafficking will be present that evening. So someone, if wants to reach out and volunteer or find a way to help this horrible issue that's facing our community and our nation, then there'll be those opportunities as well.
Again, I might just say that even if you're not in the Dallas area, you might think about coming in, because if you're a pastor that's addressing this issue, maybe your church is addressing this issue, maybe you know somebody in law enforcement. As you said, not only do you have 2 outstanding speakers, but you got these tables where you can meet all these people. It's kind of like one-stop shopping. I just think it's just really incredible. So again, wanted to mention that. We have that information, but we also have a link to iamsecond.com. Just one more time, talk about some of the resources. We just mentioned that book. Matter of fact, if people scroll back, I remember we had Dave Sterrett in studio when that first I Am Second book came out, and I just think there are some resources that you could put in the hands instantaneously for people that are doing ministry, that they would benefit from the work that you've put together all these years.
Well, one of the most simplest thing, and whether you're in ministry or not, that you can utilize from I Am Second is the I Am Second wristband.
Let's hold those up, yeah. Yeah.
I'm wearing one.
And the wristbands, as well as some simple T-shirts or caps or things like that with the words I Am Second on them, are guaranteed to start a conversation.
Oh, yes.
Yes, they do.
And it may not be where you think the conversation ought to go. And people will question why you don't want to be first.
Yeah.
But it's a door opener to a conversation.
It sure is. And again, we have some of those here, but again, I'm glad you hold those up, and we'll maybe mention them again in just a few minutes. But one of the ones that I think got your visibility, I think for a while I was watching these videos, and then all of a sudden it went boom. And what I think is Brian Head Welch. Now, again, some of our listeners that don't follow music going, I don't even know who he is. If you click on his picture, you're going to go, whoa, okay. This is not the guy I would be thinking would giving a Christian testimony. And that one just went viral, as many of them have anyway. But you have the rest of the story about that. So share that if you might.
You know, Brian's was one of the first films that we actually put on the website. And it immediately caught people's attention just from his looks, his backstory with the band Korn, his international familiarity in the rock world. And it really did go viral, and it went into a number of different languages, and people really resonated. He was so articulate about his faith, and yet he was still at that point only about 4 years into his faith. And he was going through a journey of having left the band and raising his daughter as a single dad and still trying to maintain a music career, but not in the mainstream. So it was a real difficult time for him, but he had an amazing testimonial about his conversion and about what that really meant in his life. And it did go viral. But a couple of years later, as we were talking with him, we said, you know, what is going on? He started telling us, and we said, wow, that's wonderful. We ought to document this somehow. And he goes, well, I don't really have a reason. But then few years later, he decided to rejoin the band.
Wow.
And so we went ahead and started documenting that. That's about 5 years ago now. And since then, we've gone ahead and released film festivals this last spring, where it was a winner, several different film festivals. And then we went ahead and it has been airing on Showtime since December. And it's got an exclusive window with Showtime, but then we'll bring it out in the spring.
That's very good. Let's take a
awesome.
break. And I thought maybe when we come back, Chip and Joanna Gaines, fixer-uppers, some people have visibility and some of the others that maybe we'll mention. These are videos you can use in your own ministry, in your life, and even in an evangelistic outreach. We'll continue our conversation about that right after these messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Veterans memorials are symbols meant to remind the living of the service and sacrifice the fallen made for freedom. That is why Gold Star mothers in 1919 started work on the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial. They did not want the world to forget the sacrifice their sons made, so they, along with the American Legion, erected a cross-shaped memorial. The design mirrored the universally accepted symbol erected over the thousands of graves of men who died in Europe defending freedom. No one complained for almost 100 years. Recently, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit refused to overturn an opinion of a panel of that court that would direct a federal district court to consider whether the monument should have its horizontal arms removed or be razed to the ground completely. Such a decision sets a dangerous precedent for veterans memorials across America. If this decision stands, other memorials will be targeted for destruction as well. First Liberty Institute will appeal this case to the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of its clients, the American Legion. I encourage you to go to don'ttearmedown.com and join us in defending this memorial to the 49 men of Prince George's County, Maryland, killed in the line of duty during World War I. We forget what we do not see. Unless the Supreme Court intervenes, the Bladensburg Memorial and similar memorials in close by Arlington National Cemetery may disappear as well. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Sue Bailey with us, as well as John Humphrey, and we were talking about Brian Head Welch and corn, so we might as well mention the film. First of all, corn is not spelled with a C, it's spelled with a K, and crazy isn't spelled with a C, it's spelled with a K. So go to Loud Crazy with a K, love, loudcrazylove.com, and people can watch that. They can go backstage. And there's, I guess, a fair warning. I always like to give that ahead of time. If you were to watch all that, there are mature themes. Is that right? And things of that nature. You're trying to put together one that you could actually show in the church. Is that right?
That's correct. The version on Showtime is made for that audience. And the version that we'll have for church will take out some of the profanity that is included in there by some of those band members. And but there will be another version available for churches to host in May, and then also for purchase and individual use in June.
Well, again, just another resource that are available. And, Sue, I know that your husband's been on this program before, and he's worked with young people in the public schools, mentoring, really helping them stay away from various kinds of activities that are going to ruin their goals and their dreams and things like that.
Right.
Just a little bit of a shout out to, just say yes, as we say so often. We do have that link on our website. And this would be the kind of resource that anybody involved in youth ministry might be able to use, right?
Absolutely, because, these kids are tempted like never before in all of the things in our culture. And so Dan's nonprofit actually goes out there and helps them understand to say yes to their dreams and goals, which then gives them the power and the courage to say no to some of those destructive at-risk behaviors that will truly derail them. When I worked with Dan at Just Say Yes, I would often tell people, kids don't just get up and go, oh gosh, I really want to go, be a teen mom or a drug dealer or, have to go, be through the rituals of joining a gang or whatever. That's not the way our kids are wired. This is something that the culture has permeated into their lives, and they're looking to belong to something, and they make those choices. And so if we give them some good choices to belong to, then they're far better off. And that's the reason why this film might be really good for them to see, is that it shows, the power of making a good decision, by Brian. So, and kids always learn by watching other people. If you can remember back when you were in high school, the seniors were always just amazing, no matter what. And so it's the same. The same is still true today.
Well, again, if you're talking about risk behaviors, Brian Head Welch went through a few, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And so, again, sometimes it's good to expose young people to the choices they make and the consequences. Sometimes, John, as you know, their brains aren't fully formed, which is why they jump off of houses and do all sorts of crazy things as a result. And so to say, I might want to learn a vicarious lesson from some of these. And the last time you counted, 130 I Am Second videos? If you started watching one right now, sometime in March, you'd actually finish seeing them, I would think, right?
Maybe not that long, but yeah, there's a lot.
I assume some people take a rest every once in a while.
Right, but it's deliberate to have that critical mass so that a wide range of topics, a wide range of stories are available so that you could be matched with something that you are interested in or struggling with or have a need to find out more about.
And I might just mention that we've been talking about I Am Second, but I did mention E3 Ministries. Now, there is an opportunity for some of our listeners that have never gone on a short-term missions trip. Right. I've met, John, people that have never led someone to the Lord. They have never had any spiritual fruit. I guarantee if they go on one of your trips, they're going to have opportunities to share the gospel, and in some cases, opportunities to see that they actually left behind the beginnings of a church, right?
Absolutely. E3's been doing that for over 30 years, and so the international side of E3 and the short-term mission trips is certainly a big part of what we have done and are doing. But there's also a move here in the U.S. for people to go ahead and to learn how to be trained with gospel conversations where they can go ahead in their own backyard with their own church and go ahead and reach people that wouldn't normally be reached.
And again, since we haven't spent a lot of time talking about E3, explain what the 3 E's are so that people can maybe keep that in their head.
Sure. It's equipping people to evangelize their communities around the world and establishing thriving, multiplying churches.
Yeah, so again, those are just a couple of resources that are available right down there on the second floor of the Hope Center.
That's
One last time, talk about that, because bringing all those people together has been really very significant. There's a synergism, if I can use a big word at this hour of the day, that is happening. And you really have a vision that the Hope Center in Plano, Texas is not the only one in the country, but you'd like to plant some others, wouldn't you?
We would. We definitely would, because we see the significance that it's making in working, towards telling people about Jesus. There's all kinds of ways you can tell people about Jesus, and many of them are represented right there in the Hope Center. I mean, First Liberty, you wouldn't think of First Liberty as really telling people about Jesus, but they do in their own way, in the way that God led Kelly Shackelford to pursue it. And then there's Dan Wallace, who pursues, finding the sacred manuscripts, that are going to actually come alongside the New Testament and prove that Jesus, did in fact walk this earth. And so there's so many different kinds of nonprofits that are in the Hope Center, and they do all work together. Josh McDowell works with, Dan Wallace on those sacred manuscripts, we get the opportunity to work with I'm Second and talk to them about, the videos that they're doing. We get the opportunity to block out a room for them to use for as long as they want. And then, we can actually rent event space out to other nonprofits, faith-based nonprofits that want to come in and have a wonderful experience. The goal is to use the Hope Center all the time, max it out. We want to be good stewards of what God's given to us. So, yeah, there's synergy moving in those halls every single day. And
a couple of other names I might mention: June Hunt's sat on this chair here. We just mentioned Noel Boucher. I mean, you just go down this long list of individuals that we've been able to call upon on this program. So, again, for individuals that find themselves in the Dallas area, if they can find their way to the Hope Center, you'll give them a tour, right?
I will give them a tour, and I'll buy them coffee and lunch or anything else. I would love to have them come.
And they get to see that white chair with all those signatures, right?
Yeah, they'll be able to stop by and take a look at it. Not always sit in it, though.
Can't. Yeah. They used to be able to sit in it, and I took pictures. But here's the sad thing. The manufacturer that made the white chair is no more.
Oh.
So we are very protective of the white chair now. So.
Yes. And again, they'd love the Hope Center because it is like a lodge, isn't it?
It is.
And I had somebody looking around and said, okay, I give up. Where's the ski jump? I mean,
big old fireplace.
Yeah, just the whole thing. So,
prayer garden.
John, it's been great to have you in studio. I certainly appreciate all the good work that you've done there at I Am Second. I do a commentary every day, and I always end it, I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view. And after I did an I Am Second commentary, I said, I'm Kerby Anderson, and I am second, and everybody goes, what? Where'd that come from? So over the years, this I am second has worked. Hold up the material. Let me hand up one right now so that people say that if they're interested, they can get some of these little banners, these little various bracelets and things like that. Say, I am second. There are books, resources, videos, 130 videos. So that'll keep us busy for a while. So, John, thanks for being with us today here on Point of View.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Kerby. And, I just wanted to give a shout out real quick to one of my mentors, Bob Briner. And Bob was the connection point initially between you and I. And it's amazing to see what he has done in your life since I've known you back from that time with Bob.
Roaring Lambs, and we've even had, of course, Donna Skell here with Roaring Lambs Ministry. Yes. So we've always had that. And I think I actually have 2 copies of the Roaring Lambs book in my shelf right across the way. But we're out of time. And Nick Pitt's going to be sitting in this chair tomorrow. We're doing the Millennial Roundtable, and then I'm back here on Thursday and Friday, of course. But if you would like more on some of the material we've talked about today, it's all available at our website, pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow, right here on Point of View.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare. And they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.